Grandma's inheritance changed everything after my parents kicked me out and preferred my sister because of a missing bracelet. My sister was always given preference by my parents, who once expelled me for having a lost bracelet. They, therefore, arrived at my house in tears years later when my grandmother delivered me the family's inheritance in lieu of her. I grew up in a modest suburban home with 2 parents and a younger sister, which is what most people would consider a standard middle-class family. We appear to be a picture-perfect family to outsiders. However, anyone who knew us well would tell you that my parents and I were constantly. The explanation was straightforward. I was usually the last thing on their mind, and they loved my younger sister, Stella. However, it wasn't always that way. I recall how devoted and kind my parents were to Stella and me when we were young. They shed us with love, and for good reason. We were a rather intelligent couple who were excellent. Nothing seemed to separate us during the golden age we shared. Both of us participated in gymnastics, art classes, and piano lessons, and our parents were equally pleased with us. There was no little favor for one of us over the other, and I never experienced any tension. But when I started 6th grade, everything changed. There was only one test. At first, I received a poor grade, the first in my life. Even though it wasn't a very significant one, it was sufficient for my parents to start viewing me in a different light. It was obvious to me that something had changed when Stella brought home another flawless score. My mother wouldn't give me the same look that she gave Stella. While Stella's accomplishments were greeted with sincere pride, the praise they used to give me began to feel forced. All of a sudden, Stella was the one who could do no wrong, and I was the loose thread that could unravel at any. I initially believed it to be a passing phase. Perhaps I was being overly sensitive. However, it was impossible to ignore. I was held accountable for any mistakes I made, no matter how minor. Stella's mistakes were dismissed, or worse, forgiven. She's just having an off day, my dad used to say. Why can't you be more like Stella? Was my constant question. I was plagued with the statement during my adolescence. Stella became the daughter my parents had always desired. As we grew older, she was gregarious, intelligent, and well-liked. She was the popular girl, the homecoming queen, and the class president. Conversely, my introversion increased. I studied hard, remained to myself, and succeeded in my own unique way. However, it was never sufficient to rival Stella. I eventually gave up trying. The disparities in our treatment had become starkly apparent by the time we were in high school. Stella always had her own car, brand new clothes, and all the attention. Our parents would spend hours sitting with her when she needed homework help, making sure she grasped every step. If I sought assistance, they would either dismiss me and instruct me to solve the problem on my own, or it would be too late in the evening. They had begun to treat Stella like a princess and treat me like an adult. Stella had everything given to her, but I quickly realized that if I wanted something, I would have to work for it. I made an effort to keep up my relationship with Stella in spite of the unequal treatment. She was my sister, after all, and I cherished her. However, it becomes increasingly difficult to overlook her increasing entitlement, knowing she could get away with it. She appeared to enjoy the attention. Stella was loved by more people than just my parents. Her allure enthralled our friends, instructors, and even complete strangers. I was the background darkness, and she was the shining girl. I started to question whether others truly viewed me for who I was, or if I was merely Stella's sister. The pivotal moment occurred one summer following my high school graduation. I was eager to leave the house and start over. After receiving a partial scholarship to a respectable college, I believed that my parents and I may get along better with some space, and that they would eventually miss me when I was gone. I was mistaken. At this point, Stella began dating Greg, our high school football team standout quarterback. He was well-liked, attractive, and from a rich family. Naturally, my folks adored him. They regarded him as though he were their son. My parents would prepare extravagant dinners to impress Greg, who spent every weekend at our place. They were obviously already looking forward to the day when Stella and Greg would tie the knot, start a family, and have the ideal grandchildren. I was working part-time to help pay for the expenses my scholarship didn't cover. While I was having trouble getting through my first semester of college, Stella and Greg's most recent excursions or Stella's academic performance were the only topics I heard when I returned home after. Fatigued, nobody inquired about me or my situation. They would also say sarcastic things like, "Why can't you find someone like Greg? What remained of our family dynamic was devastated by the charges that followed. I came home for a VY sit one weekend when I was off from college before Stella's new bracelet, a gold charm bracelet that Greg had given her, vanished. Everything appeared to be as usual. Stella was upset, and it was a costly item. In a state of complete panic, my parents tore the house apart in an attempt to find it. Stella speculated that perhaps I had taken it when they were unable to locate it. I initially believed her to be kidding, but she wasn't. The pre-VYS evening, she claimed to have witnessed me ogling the bracelet and hinted that I might have removed it out of it. I was enraged. Her bracelet was untouchable by me. I hadn't given it a second consideration. My parents, however, believed her without hesitation. Of course, I objected. My folks wouldn't listen even though I vowed I hadn't taken it. They thought I had stolen it to get even. In fact, my father once remarked, "We always knew you were jealous of Stella." That was the most painful thing they had ever uttered. It seemed as though the years spent VYing to be a good daughter and gain their approval had been in vain. They threatened to leave the house unless I returned the jewelry. What I was hearing was unbelievable. They didn't believe me even though I had my word and no EVY denke of my own. Their decisions had already been made, so I went out. I didn't turn around after packing my things and Leah VYing the house. I severed all contact with them. I had no other option. I couldn't continue to live in a home where I was treated like a criminal for no fault of mine. To help me get back on my feet, I found a friend to stay with. I didn't talk to my parents again for years after that. Without the help of my family, I struggled in the ensuing year. I was left to do it all by myself. I struggled to make ends meet while balancing employment and education. On some days, I didn't think I would make it, but I did. After graduating, I secured a respectable career and gradually began to establish a life for myself. Stella was doing well in the meantime, according to mutual friends. She had secured a lucrative position at a marketing company, and she and Greg remained together. She had gotten into it with my father's help. For them, nothing appeared to have changed. Without me, they were still the ideal family. I didn't hear from my family for 5 years. My life had to be rebuilt from the ground up. My grandmother, my dad's mother specifically, was the only one who pro-VY-ded me with any kind of assistance or spiritual support. I was unexpectedly in VY-TED to my grandmother, Olive's Christmas dinner. To put it mildly, I was taken aback. The only member of the family who had ever treated me fairly was my grandma. She never mentioned my parents or made an effort to get me to make amends with them, but she did occasionally send me a birthday card or text to check in. After everything that had transpired, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go when I received the VY Tatayon, but I had a gut feeling that I should. It was like entering a time capsule when I got to the supper. Along with a few other family members, my parents, Stella, and even Greg were present. There was a noticeable tension. Stella pretended that nothing had ever happened between us, and my parents gave me a harsh welcome. They seemed to be expecting me to put the past behind me and comply with their ideal family. I made it through the terrible night. My grandmother then began distributing gifts toward the end of the year. I didn't have any big expectations, but my heart almost stopped as I opened the box. A gold locket, an ancient family relic that had been handed down through the years, was found within the box. The jewelry wasn't just any jewelry. This locket was thought to be the legitimate heir to the family's possessions. Grandma was GIVYing it to me directly, ignoring her son, my father, and all the other grandchildren, including Stella, who had inherited it from her father. It represented more than merely custom. It implied that everything my grandparents had, including their home, land, and SAVYNGS, would eventually belong to me. When my parents realized what happened, I could see their faces become white and stunned quiet. Stella, who had always been the gold kid, sat. I could sense the tension in the room as my parents rapidly changed their tone, trying to mask their amazement, fake grief. My parents quickly drew me aside after the awkward remainder of the meeting. All of a sudden, they were remorseful, as though a few words of kindness could erase years of unfair treatment. They mentioned Stella's impending marriage and their desire for me to rejoin the family for her benefit. However, I was aware this was about money, not about love or family. Our family had always valued the heirloom, and they knew that I would be the one to inherit everything that went along with it. Now that I had it, they cared for me. Thus, they weren't worried about mending the relationship. They were concerned about their potential losses. In a tone that seemed more like a warning than an offer, my father even stated that they were prepared to forgive me for everything and begin it. They seemed to have forgotten who had initially harmed them. Other family members also added their voices, add VY sing me, to exercise common sense. They insisted that regardless of what had pre-VY usly transpired, family is everything and that I should get back in touch with. I could already hear the cliches piling up. You don't want to be alone, sharing is caring, and blood is thicker than water. I was overanalyzing the matter because of all this pressure, even though it was OBVY us what I should and shouldn't do. Knowing that they only appreciated me for what I now had, did I wish to rejoin this? Given that their newfound interest in me was motivated by self-interest, could I forgive them? What recommendations do you have regarding that? If so, I'd be in dire need of some. First update. I felt overburdened when I returned to my flat following the Christmas celebration. It was difficult to take in all that had transpired. For the remainder of the evening, I made every effort to stay away from my parents and other family members, but they persisted in trying to come near to me. Stella would not quit grinning at me as though we were suddenly best friends, and my parents would not stop glancing at me. However, I was aware that their goals were more about the family riches connected to the artifact I had been given than they were about family. Their action simply made me want to keep my distance. The days that followed were devoted to introspection. I understood that I needed to talk to Grandma in a suitable manner. The locket had useful applications in addition to its symbolic significance. It meant that I would get the family's possessions. Although I hadn't been searching for this, I needed clarification now that it was on my plate. I wasn't prepared to become entangled in family money and tradition without fully comprehending its significance. I was still anxious about bringing up the topic when I saw my grandmother. I asked her honestly what it all meant after thanking her for entrusting me with the relic. I wanted to be open and honest. I informed her that if it meant bringing me back into the instability I had fought so hard to avoid, I didn't want the family's riches. Although they weren't my top concern, I promised her that I would use the assets sensibly if they came my way. Grandma patiently listened. Then she explained something to me that I didn't fully comprehend pre-VY usly. She had spent years observe-VYing all of this. She had witnessed the family's growing estrangement, particularly following the argument between my parents and myself. She clarified that she was aware of the dysfunctional family dynamics and the harsh treatment I had received, especially from Stella and my parents. She was even aware of the fact that Stella was always given a free pass while I had to work several jobs to make ends meet during my time in college. Grandma acknowledged that she hadn't gotten involved for so long because she thought indie VY duels should be allowed to live their own life. However, she realized that her assets needed to be transferred to the appropriate person after witnessing how things had turned out, how I had been mistreated, but had still managed to create something for myself. Someone who wouldn't waste it or take it for granted. She picked me because of this. My name was on her will, which she had already made. Her honesty astonished me. The heirloom was no longer the only consideration. Trust was at issue. Grandma trusted me to take care of everything, and that duty felt significant and weighty. She reassured me that this was about entrusting the family's future to people she knew would uphold it, not about compensating me for what I had endured. Even though it seemed odd to find myself in this situation all of a sudden, I couldn't help but feel validated. Grandma had seen the truth, and it meant more than anything else. Therefore, all those years of being the forgotten daughter suddenly didn't matter. But although this made a lot of things clearer, it also made things more complicated. The inheritance remained a threat, and I was certain that my parents and Stella would do all in their power to regain control. Now that they were aware of the consequences, they had no intention of letting it go lightly. Second update. Hi, everyone on Reddit. While I return with an update, the situation has gotten worse. If you have been following along, you are aware of how chaotic my family situation. I was mistaken to believe that returning to school would bring me any calm. I went back to my flat in the hopes of escaping the drama, following the Christmas debacle in which Stella and my parents essentially begged for the family inheritance. I tried to ignore my family's incessant calls and texts by immersing myself in my work for a few days. Naturally, though, such tranquility was short-lived. Not only did Stella and my parents keep sending texts, but so did the rest of my family. Suddenly, relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years felt obligated to settle the conflict. They were all repeating the same phrases: "Don't let money tear you apart. Family is everything." And my personal favorite: "You're being selfish." The fact that these relatives were unaware of the entire scenario only made matters worse. While Stella had it all and lived the ideal life, they were not around when my parents disowned me. or when I had to scrounge for food and rent while attending college. They only cared about what they had heard from my parents, who were now neatly playing the VY Tims, and didn't give a damn about the years of it. Their opinion suffocated me. Before things took a startling turn, I believed I could just ignore everything and concentrate on my work. Stella and my dad unexpectedly came up to my apartment one afternoon. You read correctly. They showed up at my house without my and VY tatai on. They seemed to have a purpose, which was to coerce me into making amends or something, of course, on their terms. I could hear my mother sobbing from the hallway as they pounded on the door and called my name. I went cold. After several months of being with me, my friend appeared frightened, and I was at a loss for what to do. My parents began begging me in front of my pal as soon as I opened the door. My mother was crying as she talked about how they couldn't let me go and how we had to make things right as though I had done something. My dad said that they were willing to forgive me for everything. Stella, meanwhile, was standing there pretending to be worried, but I could see straight through her. She was more concerned about what would happen if I didn't agree to split the inheritance than she was about making amends. They weren't listening to me when I tried to keep the topic quiet and told them that this wasn't the right time or place for it. While my dad stayed in the doorway, refusing to leave, my mom VY ritually shoved past me in an attempt to enter the apartment. They kept interrupting me to talk about Stella's impending marriage and the necessity to restore the family's unity before that could happen. They tried to coerce me into agreeing to give up a portion of the future inheritance, which, mind you, I didn't even formally receive yet, by making it seem like I was the one destroying them. It was a humiliating scene. My neighbors began to emerge from their rooms to observe the mayhem. I was doing everything I could to keep it quiet, but the more they lingered, the louder they became. Stella stood there looking smug, as though she knew they would finally wear me down. While my mom was on her knees pleading with me to forgive them, I was stuck and didn't know what to do. They refused to budge when I told them to go. After what seemed like hours of begging, I finally had enough and phoned security. Fortunately, security showed up right away. At first, they asked my parents to leave in a courteous manner, but they refused. Security had to step in at that point and threatened to call the police if they didn't leave. It was a whole new level of embarrassment. Before my parents ultimately gave in, my mother made a huge public announcement that I was Leah VYing my home. Stella went one step farther. As if that wasn't enough, she informed a number of my friends via text after she left that I had deserted her. She cleverly omitted the part where they had disowned me for something I didn't even do, making it seem like I was the bad guy in this situation. I had to explain the entire thing to some of my friends because they were understandably perplexed. It was draining, and I was astounded by the extent Stella would go to in order to appear to be the VY Tim. I'm not sure what to do right now. I'm attempting to move on and haven't spoken to my parents since that happened, but I can't help but watch over them. Because of their desperation, I feel like I'm being forced into a difficult situation where I have to give in order to please everyone. However, I will never forget the way they treated me. However, the pressure is too much to handle. A part of me questions whether this will ever end or if I will have to live with it forever. It seems like my family is desperate to pull me back into their mess, even though right now I simply want to concentrate on me and my future. Third update. Greetings once more, Reddit users. Hold on tight, for after my last report, things have become considerably worse. To be honest, though, I wasn't sure I wanted anything to do with them. After everything, I couldn't help but wonder what's keeping them from turning on me again. If it was so simple to do so based only on a story, what assurance did I have that my parents wouldn't act in the same way if a new circumstance arose, given their ability to change their minds so swiftly in the past, supporting Stella and rejecting me? I felt as though I would have to be cautious around them all the time, wondering if their devotion to me was sincere or merely practical. I would want to put myself first and take a vacation from them all for the time being. Don't bring me back into their mess. Let them handle it on their own. My parents also contacted me again after all of this, but they spoke in a different tone. They stopped pressuring me and making me feel guilty. They nearly apologized, but I could see they weren't sincere. In order to obtain the future inheritance, they were still concentrating on the money and trying to make things go as smoothly as possible. They were more concerned with maintaining appearances and ensuring financial stability than they were with actually repairing our relationship, particularly now that Stella's future wasn't looking as stable as. To be honest, I haven't replied to them, and I'm not sure I will even if they come with an apology. I'm not prepared to open that door again because this entire event has served as a brutal reminder of how toxic my family can be. I'm concentrating on myself and the future I want to create on my own terms, free from the burden of their deceit and manipulation. For the time being, Reddit, that's enough for now. I appreciate all of your guidance and help during this journey. I feel like I'm now beginning to see things more clearly, even though it's been a difficult journey. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.